Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to Gather for Her. Thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you to our live audience, and thank you to those joining us. We're going to be actually launching into a bit of a precursor conversation. We are trusting and expecting a conversation with our guest, Nadine Bernard, and we're just going to start off with a conversation and see where it goes. And if we need to rebook with Nadine, we will do so. I want to welcome my co-host this morning and thank you two for your patience as well. Good morning, good morning. Good morning to everyone who's on the call this morning.
Good morning,
Yes.
Char. I'm going to actually go over to you, Christina. I know that I get to ride your coattails, but I'm just going to say good morning. Good morning from Niquelaquam, also known as Bowen Island on the traditional ancestral unceded territory of the Squamish people. I am just thrilled to follow this morning. Over to you, Miss Christina.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Tina. And thank you, Char. And good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Christina Benty, and I'm joining you here today from Golden, BC, which is also the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa and the Shuswap peoples and the Columbia River Métis. And as many of you know, and some of you were super excited about being here today to listen to Nadine speak. Hopefully we will either get her on screen, like Char said, or we'll reschedule her, and we will trust the timing of our lives in spite of the technology, instead of kind of wrestling with it. So we're pleased to be here. I was super excited about the conversation, of course, because this was going to be a conversation about political leadership and walking bravely in political leadership. And the reason that Nadine was connected to us here is because of our beautiful soul sister, Amanda, who is working closely with Nadine. And I was also super excited because it's one of my favorite provinces. I mean, I love BC, of course, but I have done plenty of work in Nova Scotia, and particularly in the area where Nadine is a candidate. I love Nova Scotia and love that area. It's absolutely beautiful. And one of the things that came up for us in our preparation, particularly speaking to Nadine and Amanda, was her lens of seventh generational thinking when it comes to political leadership. And you've certainly heard me speak a lot about that and the importance of that kind of decision making in our political leaders, and the co-created reality and co-created nature of the relationship between political leadership and informed and engaged and brave citizenship. So it's not just about having high expectations of our political leaders, it's also having high expectations of ourselves as a in that co-generative relationship. So although Nadine is not here with us today at the moment, I would love to have a conversation between the three of us around political leadership and the difference between some of our traditional ideas about politics and leadership. And I know I have certainly been thinking a lot about that. I wrote a piece recently that I haven't done anything with, but thinking about the importance of focusing on seventh generational thinking and focusing on serving seventh generation versus focusing on pleasing voters, which is that immediate gratification that we all want. And how do we hold the complexity of both and, right? We as citizens, how do we engage in that kind of thinking so that we're calling our political leadership to a higher decision making, and instead of just having that lens of, again, voter pleasing, saying what people want to hear, instead of wrestling with complexity. So I'm I'm curious, Shar, because you and I both have the experience of political leadership. When you think about that seventh generational thinking, what are some of the messages that come up for you, and when you think about calling political leaders higher, how do we do that as citizens?
Well, I think it's being modeled for us right now. I think that we are seeing, we had a bit of a conversation with Catherine Bullock about this recently. And I said, how does it feel to be walking into a political arena at a federal level when there are really amazing leaders, conscious leaders, in my opinion, that are exiting politics right now? How does that make you feel? And it's an honest question. And she said, you bravely walk onto the path that has been opened up a little bit more because of the women who have gone before you. And you don't run from it, because that's not serving them, or that's not serving the leaders that have come before you. And it's certainly not serving the women and the young girls coming up after you. So I followed some of the breadcrumbs of the conversations with, amazing women like Jessica Hill and Sonia Firstino, and not on Gather, but in numerous PowHERhouse events, Melanie Mark, and now Nadine. As I find hope that the women I see running are, I find hope that they regard themselves as change makers for their families and the communities and the planet. And they're there as change makers. They identify as change makers. And I think that's where I'd love to start. And all of these women are carrying with them, whether they are, the color of their skin is, regardless of the color of their skin, I believe that they are trying to bring in conscious values of, that I see some unity. And I find it fascinating, because politics hasn't caught up to the change makers. That's my play on it, right? We're in a system where politics hasn't caught up to the people that are actually running.
Yeah, that's a good point, because traditionally politics has been adversarial. It has been very much about people pleasing. It's been self-protective by nature. It's transactional. So all of the things that it's also about staying on message, right? Staying on message and staying on track, instead of wrestling with complexity and complex issues, instead of being that vulnerability, the willingness to be wrong and to work towards getting it right, the vulnerability of being able to apologize and to say, I'm sorry, we messed up. What can we do to do things differently? And this is it traditionally has not been welcomed in politics, and it's changing. Like you said, when we're talking about change makers, we're talking about change makers at the very foundational level, like foundation in terms of the entire system. The system has been built in an adversarial environment. Tina, I'm curious about your thoughts about that as an observer, like,
So I went back to calling our politicians up, right? Like that's where I went. And I drew this circle with 3 segments in it because I was thinking back to Catherine's conversation and the visual of putting a kitchen table right in the middle of the house, and what happens there, and I was also sitting with knowing that the entire world is going through an up level right now, and so our politicians are, which really, if we take the label of politician off and we keep the label of standing for, right? Just like the human being standing for, it shifts our story about what a politician is. So I drew this circle with 3 sections, and the first section is drive, like a leader drives, right? We elect a leader because they're a change maker. Back to Char's languaging, they're a change maker. They are catalysts. They move something forward. And then I thought the other piece is quadrant is listening and wisdom. Like, does this person who's standing for this quadrant of where do they listen? Who's their counsel? How do they do that? And then the third piece, and this is my most hopeful place as a citizen in Canada, is I'm so hopeful when I see Indigenous leaders leading our country, because this third quadrant is what I've experienced in PowHERhouse, and I'm learning about our Indigenous way, is this ability to root and to hold and to simply stop the show and just hold and wait until whatever the thing is tells us what to do. Creator. And so when I think about up-leveling and holding our politicians to this new level, it's these 3 quadrants, and I'm so excited that Nadine is on the ballot. Yay, Nadine! I can't wait to learn from you.
Oh, that is, Tina, that's so beautiful, and it reminds me of the fact that Indigenous people are the original systems thinkers. So they understand interconnectedness, right, between land and water and air, but also past and present, right? So that when you invite all of those elements into the room in your decision making, there is a wisdom that's invited. So I love that term, wisdom council, right? And that you're and circle leadership, right? That you're inviting all of that wisdom into the room, and that's the lens through which you make decisions. Like that, you're right. That makes me hopeful. And I know in my own work, I've never been able to use that language until now. I would say the last year and a half, that when I work with a group, I'm able to use that kind of language. Invite in the land, invite in the air, invite the water to the room, invite your grandchildren's grandchildren, invite your ancestors.
Wow.
Right? We often talk about what does it mean to be a good ancestor? And one of the questions, actually, I asked this last week to a group. I said, someday you are going to be the ancestor. How do you want to be remembered in your decision making? And that includes, so that's not only change makers. For all of those who are listening, the challenge is, how will you be remembered also as a citizen and as a voter? Are you going to vote for somebody who just says whatever you want them to say, that's going to keep you safe, that's going to keep you in certainty, right? Or are you willing to also, in your voting and in your conversations, invite everything to your wisdom circle in your decision making?
I I find it interesting, and I'm curious, the people that are here with us this morning, inviting everyone who is live into the conversation this morning. One thing that I've noticed in politics, in decision making, is leaders who run on issues only. They run because there's a certain issue. They tend to, for me, to be fizzling out. And now there's more focus on the values that the leaders stand for and that they are embodying. And in fact, if they don't come to the party already embodying those values, where they can turn and point to the evidence, the lived evidence of the values that they say they embody. So, there's pieces there that I find really, really grounding, really grounding, because in the past, I witnessed political leaders who would run strictly based on an issue. And you could feel that. And I'm curious with the folks that are, here with us this morning, just, by commenting in the chat, what, if you had to say the top, in your mind, I'm just curious to see the list, but if you had to say the top 2 or 3 values that come up for you in this new genesis and this reimagination of the type of leaders and change makers that we want making decisions for our communities, what are the top 2 or 3 values? Like, what are our filters that we're using as good citizens? Because I think that it's up to us to do the calling. It's up to us. It will change as we change it.
I want to pass to Christina around Brenda's leaning into this the drive conversation, which I think goes a little bit to what you're talking about too, Shar, and driving structural change of the political arena. And then she says architecture of leadership and governance, designing for the future of the human habitat. And where that takes you, Christina, around the tangibles of these values that Shar is bringing forward.
I can't actually see the chat. Can you say a little bit more about it?
So the architecture of leadership and governance, designing for the future of the human habitat. There's something very tangible that Brenda's pointing to. And because that's your wheelhouse. You step in the room and bring the intangible into tangible, or invite intangible into the tangible, so that it's energetically sound. And so I just want to, what are you noticing around this? What would you offer here?
So what am I noticing? Well, and this comes back to actually what I said earlier about noticing a hunger to wrestle with complexity and to simplify to make simple the complexity without simplifying it. So looking for what are those tangible. Yay! Welcome.
At the end.
I'm happy dancing. It's okay. We get you twice now because we'll book you again.
Exactly. And you kind of rescued me from a question that I actually need to chew on. So it's all good. I'm not sure exactly how I want to answer that question right now. So we're grateful that you're here. Welcome, Nadine.
Oh, what a morning. Just technology was not my friend today.
Welcome, welcome. Well, we have shared your bio, but for the purposes of the recording and our podcast, I'm going to just quickly do it again and just let you have a chance to breathe. Please know that you are so welcome. Open hearts. We're excited to have you here. And we're just going to be with the question that is arising right now for us. Nadine Bernard's story begins in the Mi'kmaq community of Wacomic, across the waters of Waikokomo. And her political journey started many years ago and has instilled into her children the importance of having a strong voice. And Nadine's involvement with the Liberal Party as the lead for Aboriginal people's vision, understanding of, number one, the complexity of issues, and two, having difficult conversations, but mostly about building relationships. And I think that's what we're talking about right now. I'll just finish by saying there's much more, but Nadine has been an incredibly dedicated board member for several community organizations. She's vastly experienced in broad decision-making and strategic planning, as well as advocacy and listening to the needs of Nova Scotians. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yes, welcome, Nadine. We're so pleased that you're here. And I don't know if you've been catching some of the conversation, but it's been
A little bit.
Yeah, fair enough. You definitely live in one of my favorite provinces. So we're so pleased that you're here, and we want to give you an opportunity to share a bit about yourself and your journey, and what does it mean to you to walk bravely as a political leader at this time, walking towards political leadership, walking as an artist of impact, and why now?
I think, well, to answer the first part of the question that you had asked, is somebody has to take the first step to move forward. Any new path is always somebody making the marking in the ground, and getting through the barriers of the trees and the bushes and all those things that kind of slow you down or could intimidate you to not go further. So and now is the time. I think that the conversations that have been happening over the last few years, especially in the last 10, I would say, when the Truth and Reconciliation report had come out, and that the conversations started to happen, and that courage and bravery and humility and speaking your truth and being honest about the dark truths and the hidden truths of this country. So when you're coming into politics and you want to be in an arena that wasn't designed to be completely inclusive of Indigenous people, I think it's an important step to do, because lots of people are watching. There's other women watching, there's children watching, grandchildren watching, and great-grandchildren watching. And that's how you can make those impacts, that go 7 generations moving forward, because you have all these eyes looking behind you. But these are the eyes that are going to be the next one who are going to lead and continue making these new paths and go further.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that you are entering an arena that historically has not been designed to be inclusive, right? And that is as a change maker, that is part of what you're called to do, is to design that path. And like you said, you're working through, you're kind of forging a new path through the forest, and that really does mean walking bravely. Tell us a little bit more about what that experience has been like, and what's present in your life right now.
It's a little intimidating. It's it feels like climbing an icy mountain sometimes. I get to a spot where I feel like I have gotten to a point where I felt like I have progress, and then something will happen to push me back, and that's maybe not buy-in from our own community sometimes, and within our own Indigenous communities, feeling like, why is it you? Why should it be you? And so, pulling me back. Or that I don't understand, how the whole system works, and being the lone person, right? Being an Indigenous candidate within this space and feeling really lonely, and feeling like I don't fit in completely to spaces and conversations. And so when these really difficult things happen, such as the findings across this country of over 2,000 unmarked graves of children in residential schools, and as a residential school survivor's descendant, generational descendant, no one's asking, no one's reassuring, and no one's bringing that conversation to the forefront. So things that are important in my community and my people aren't as important or at the forefront for a lot of other people.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's something really interesting that you said around feeling alone at the table, right? And so part of the challenge is to surround yourself with the support that you need, so that you're not alone. Because we've actually heard a lot of folks say that, who've been, we heard from Melanie Mark, we've heard from other politicians that have said it's lonely. It feels like you're alone at the table. How do we make sure that we either create a new table, or that those people that we're sending to the table are not alone?
Exactly. Just because they open a door to let you into the party doesn't mean that they actually want you at the party. And so being lonely is not that I don't want to be engaged or that I'm disengaged from the conversation or the group. It's that is feeling safe and feeling welcomed, and that the conversations and what you're bringing to it is going to be welcomed. And so it's not that I'm afraid even to be here either. I appreciate it, and I value relationships, and I value conversation. So I think that at least I'm in the door, and being open to having those conversations with people, moving forward.
Beautiful.
I have a dream that we will have a Canadian ecosystem of Indigenous women in political positions, regardless of party, regardless of level of government, that actually demonstrate and model what is possible when you bring Indigenous value to government, beyond parties, beyond levels of government, beyond geographical boundaries. I wanted to ask you, Nadine, there are definitely some supporters on this call from across the country. I know tomorrow I'm sitting in on an ecosystem of Indigenous women for entrepreneurs, and I wonder what message you might want us to take with us, to feel hands at your back right now in this journey that you're walking forward with. What would you have us know? How can we support you as we reach out, to perhaps voters in your riding, perhaps beyond that? I'm super curious, what's the message that we can take and help you to amplify?
I would say that either to continue doing what you're doing, interspaces that are intimidating, be at tables and conversations where even if you feel like you can't contribute anyway. As an Indigenous person in this country, who we are, and Elder Albert Marshall and the late Regina Marshall had pegged the term two-eyed seeing. so that we, as an Indigenous person, we see it from this perspective and this from a non-Indigenous perspective, and how do we see the same path and the same ending? So I would ask, all the women on the call is to, create a space for other people to follow, and be driven by the strong, Indigenous principles of values of respect and truth and honesty and wisdom, humility, all those things, and not compromise, because women and those following us need to be able to see that as an example in a person of no compromise. When I identify myself, and how I tell my children to identify themselves too, is always say who you are first. You are Mi'kmaq first, you are Canadian second, and you are Nova Scotian third. We are older than this country, and next I am within this country, and thirdly I'm within this province. So if you can do those 3 introductions of yourself proudly and with no shame, because we shouldn't be ashamed of who we are as a people in this country, even though history has done everything possible to oppress us and make us feel ashamed to identify who we are first. So I would say to the people in the room, make sure that you know who you are first, and your identification is strongly rooted in where you come from.
Oh, that's so beautiful, because shame shuts down conversations, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It shuts down conversations. It leads to people in fear and disappearing and trauma. And when people are in trauma and shame, then they just disappear from the conversation, and those voices aren't heard. That's so powerful. Thank you for that. Tina, I'm curious about what's coming up for you. I know we only have a couple more minutes, and I'm obviously hoping that we're going to have another conversation with you, Nadine. And there's some real things I'd love to dig into, but I'm curious as to what.
Well, like, selfishly, I am captivated, and I'm like, I need to write an article about you. Oh, we lost you, Nadine. Oh, here she comes.
No, I'm here.
Okay. We are older than this country. That's what I'm leaving with. Like, for me, I am going to, like, that will walk with me all week. That makes me check your ballot. We are older than this country. This is where we follow. This is where we go. Thank you. That's like, and that to me, if when we do this again, that's where I want to dive in, is leadership from that place. And thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
My final thoughts will actually be of a call to those who are on the conversation. If any particular questions come up for Nadine, I hope that you'll let us know, and we'll do our best in the short term to rebook us. It might be at a special time and place. We don't know. We're just gonna let you know. I also want to just put a call out to really double check your networks and your connections. Who do you know? I know from running into political elections that not only do you need bravery and energy, but you need dollars, and you need volunteers. Like, there's a real tangible logistic piece that I would not feel that I'd serve this conversation if I didn't ask. So as we follow up from this conversation and invite you to the next, we'll be sure to share the links of how we can help and where we can point. We happen to know people that are deeply committed to this campaign, so where we can point them towards, should we know folks in the area and we want to help. I'll leave it to you to close, Christina.
Well, thank you again for being very patient as you have tried to get on a couple times and finally arrived. And we're just going to trust that the next conversation is we're going to have more time to really dig in with you around that. the Wisdom Council and the that 7th generational thinking, and your commitment to that in your political leadership. So I'm very very much looking forward to the conversation and the bravery that you've brought. And Charlene actually touched on part of the bravery. Part of the bravery is asking for help. I need help. I need volunteers. I need funds, right? Those are the kind of tangible things that sometimes we can shrink away from, and yet those are very real ways that people can provide support, and that actually can. That's how people can be practical hands at your back when it comes to providing the support for the change makers. If we want to forge that path, we've got to do it in tangible and intangible ways. So thank you so much for joining us and for your patience. Thank you all for being here and your patience in this. And just a reminder to continue to ask yourself, what is walking bravely in leadership? And I think of leadership as artistry, right? The artistry of leadership. What does it mean to you, and deepen your understanding of that. So thank you all for being here, and thank you so much, Nadine.
Thank you.